Good morning, welcome to Greece. My name's Andrew and I live here. Now actually, 4 years ago, when I was 48, my wife and I managed to retire here. So this video really is a retrospective, a look back perhaps at the decisions we made, the choices we made that enabled us to retire at the age of 48. This is not some financial guru video. This is not some fantasy. This is not some bull, This is simply a look back at what we did and the lessons and the learning that I'm now going to list in this video. There are 11 of them. And I was not some skilled individual. I'm not some financial advisor. I'm not some expert. So for God's sake, don't take my advice. This is simply what we did, what worked for us and what enabled us to retire in Greece. So just before I start with my 11 lessons, I just want to talk about the fact that actually, technically, I don't believe my wife and I are retired. We are not technically retired because we don't draw a pension, and we can't do so until we're at least 57 and may well do so much later than that. What my wife and I recognised at a very young age was that if we wanted to have some choices in life, if we wanted to choose what we were going to do and when we were going to do it, we needed a passive income. And our 11 lessons really are about how we achieved that passive income, what decisions we made through the last 30 years to enable us to do that, to now live and stand here and make YouTube videos for you. And yes, we will retire, but hopefully our passive income will continue to provide exactly that, a passive income when we draw a pension as well. So that's what these 11 lessons are about. And I really wanted to make that point because I think it's important as a mindset you understand that there is a gap that has to be filled if you retire early before you take your actual retirement pension. So my lesson number one is very, very simple. You have to have a firm intention to stop working early, and you have to have that intention from a very early age because it takes time. Everything we live off now, we save, but it came from an intention, a realization that I had in 1995, 30 years ago. I was very fortunate. I graduated as an engineer from university and I got myself onto a graduate training program with a big blue chip company in central London. And I was sitting there a couple of years into this job and I had a sudden realization that I would be there or working for another 40 years unless I did something about this. And me personally, maybe it's a fault. I did not want to work for 40 years. I did not want to feel committed. I felt like I was selling my life to people. And I realized as long as I was having to earn a wage, commit myself to someone else's benefit, I was never going to be able to do that for myself. And that intention ultimately developed into a plan. But it was really critical because I was not going to sit there and do this for another 40 years. And in the end, it enabled my wife and I, who bought into the idea as well, very important that she did, to stop after 26 years. So the intention is overriding. It must be there right the way through those years that you are earning, working, developing your lives, having children, etc. Because if it's not there, you will lose sight of the end goal and you will never deliver it. My lesson number two, as soon as you can in your working life, invest in a pension. Now, it must be a decent pension, obviously. There's no point in throwing money into a policy that's not going to give you a decent return. But I was incredibly lucky. I was in a blue chip company. They had a fantastic pension. They offered matching funds. So if I put in, I think, up to 5%, they would put in up to 5%. It was effectively 5% free money for me. I would be stupid not to. And I did this between 1994 and 2004. At 2004, I changed jobs. I stopped paying into that pension. I've never paid into a pension since. But the point is I didn't need to because I paid in early enough in my life. I paid in enough money early enough in my life and I had some luck. I'll talk about luck in a minute. So it's given me the opportunity to spend money on other things, to invest in other things which provide an additional passive income. So I cannot stress it enough. Invest in the pension from day one, the moment you can. And even if it hurts, spend as much as you can on it, because what you spend in your 20s will pay you dividends in your 50s and 60s. And if you invest in your 20s instead of your 30s, or your 20s instead of your 40s, it's going to cost you significantly less to save the same amount of money because of compounding. I cannot stress that enough. Save in a pension the moment you can. So my lesson number three is critically important. You need the plan, and the plan really features two key parts. The first is you have to decide and know what you are going to need to live on annually to cover your costs, to maintain your lifestyle, to pay for cars, your bills, your hotel, holidays, whatever it happens to be. You have to decide what that figure is and you have to be realistic about it. Once you've determined that figure, you then need to ensure that you save sufficient assets. Now, assets can be cash, it can be shares, it can be property, it can be other things which return an income, but you need to ensure that you save sufficiently in order to provide, as an absolute minimum, that income, and ideally more than that. And generally, most financial advisors would say you need to take your annual requirement, let's say it's $10,000 per annum, that's what you need, and multiply it by 25 times. So in that case, you'd need $250,000. You have to have $250,000 in asset value returning income for you. And if you need $20,000, then it's $500,000, and so on and so forth. So you can see these are very big numbers, and you are never going to get to these big numbers unless you start this plan very early in your working life. Most of us are never going to have the benefit of a big inheritance or a lottery win, which is what you would need later in life to provide these numbers. So therefore, if you're going to save 250 or 500 or even more, you are going to need to absolutely have a plan and start saving very early on. And once you have that plan, you also need to consider how that money is going to decline in value. So for example, when you start taking from those assets, you need to take, let's say, typically 4%. So you're taking 4% per annum of the 250,000 to provide that 10,000. That's roughly how it works. You're taking 4%. So you're declining that value by 4% per annum. Well, you want to maintain those assets at the minimum of the original value. So you need to at least have a growth of 4% per annum. Your assets need to be returning a minimum growth of 4% per annum. But then you also have inflation. Now let's assume inflation on average is 3%. You've got to add a further 3% to that. So your assets need to be earning annually as an average across 5, 10, 15 years, because let's face it, investments are a long-term thing, not a short-term thing. 5, 10, 15 years, you need to be returning 7% plus per annum to cover what you're taking once you retire, and also the decline in real value, monetary value, because of inflation. You need to cover that so that you maintain your lifestyle, you maintain your living as you get older. But of course, that may sound scary, but the benefit is that if you're generating or delivering assets which are returning that, when you're not taking that money, you should at least be returning an additional 7% per year. So you can save, 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 and then when you start to draw down, hopefully by then, after 20, 30 years of doing this, you have a pretty good idea of what you're going to be able to afford, how your assets are going to perform, and you'll have modelled them, you'll have shaped those assets to provide what you need. Now, my lesson number 4 is you need skills, because you need to earn money. And the more money you earn, the more money potentially you can save. And the more money you can save, the more options you have in the future. So you need skills. There's no way around this. You have to make yourself valuable to employers, and you have to make them want to pay you money. And the only ways you can do that is by setting yourself apart from people, by learning things which people want, which people value, which are useful, and identifying in particular where they are useful, and maximising your potential as a result. I recognised that I could earn a lot more by living and working overseas, in Asia in particular, than I could in the UK, which was where I was originally trained and where I was working in London. So I managed to engineer a situation where my skills were very interesting to Asian manufacturers, and I got headhunted twice. Now, if you get headhunted, it's even better, because you can dictate, to a point, your own terms. Now, my lesson number 5 is perhaps counterintuitive. Debt can be good, the right debt. And what do I mean by that? Well, my wife and I were in a fantastic position. We'd moved to Asia. We were doing similar jobs to that which we were in the UK, but we were earning 3.5 times what we were in the UK. Our tax position was greatly improved, because taxation, individual taxation in Asia, in the countries we were in at the time, was much better. And moreover, the company that we were working for was paying our accommodation, was paying for our car, was paying for my daughter's schooling. So we had great income and very few outgoings. We had a fantastic life, and we did this for 15 years. So you can begin to understand how we managed to save the money. But you need to lever that advantage. So we were investing in assets in the UK. For example, we had a house that we'd been living in, we had a mortgage on it. We rented that house out. We weren't getting a huge return on our investment. We were making about 3.5% per annum, but it was a return on what had previously been a cost to us. And then you lever your advantage. So we were throwing money into this property, and then as its value was increasing, we were remortgaging to take money out of it and invest that money into other assets. Now, this may sound counterintuitive, but we were not investing in the property for a return. We were investing the money that we made in that property in other assets for return, and yet also benefiting from the capital growth of this property. This property was in London. London, as you know, is a good market. It has increased many times over the last 25 years, and we were there. It's luck. There at the right place at the right time. So effectively, we had a, let's say, 10% equity in the property. If the property was worth 10,000, we had 1,000 in it. But we were earning capital gains on the 10,000. So not only were we leveraging the opportunity of the money that we were investing, but we were then leveraging the opportunity that that created for us to invest further money elsewhere. So we were earning well, our costs were low, and we were able to invest the surplus in other assets. It's really important. You have to diversify your methods of investment and income to maximize the return, because if you don't do that, how on earth are you ever going to get to a point where you can live annually off 4% of your savings? You're never going to do it unless you have some luck and unless you look at things and think about them in this way. Now, my lesson number 6 is a recommendation, and it's very important. As soon as you find yourself at a point where perhaps the money you're saving matters to you, and if you lost it or if you invested it incorrectly, it would hurt you, you should take good, proper financial advice, and certainly not mine, and certainly not this video. You would not believe the number of people, when I was in Asia in particular, but even here in Europe, who contact me without solicitation and offer me advice. Emails, phone calls, it's just ridiculous. And I would never, ever, under any circumstances, take financial advice from someone who just contacts you randomly on the telephone or via email, because they are not interested in you. They are interested in your money and how they can take your money from you and use it for their own purposes. So if you're going to seek financial advice, seek a regulated financial advisor, find someone yourselves and let them help you understand. Now, I've talked about this 25 times multiple, I've talked about 4% drawdown, I've talked about 3% inflation. They'll talk to you all about this, but they will be able to advise you on how best to deliver that, what assets work at the moment. The market changes all the time. I'm no expert. You need people who understand the market, who have a system of research behind them that you can rely on, and who will work in your interests and will work transparently, who will charge you a fee but will justify that fee and make sure that fee is transparent to you. Never, ever, under any circumstances, take advice or talk to someone who just contacts you out of the blue, because if you do, you're going to give your money away to them. My lesson number 7 is something that you are unable to directly control, and I just hope happens for you. You need good luck. You're going to likely be investing over 25, 30 years, and you need good luck during that period. It's unlikely you're going to win the lottery. Maybe you do, and maybe that's your good luck. But my wife and I had 2 periods of particularly good luck during that time. The first was associated with my pension. Now, I mentioned that I paid into a very good blue chip pension between 1994 and 2004. I then left the firm, I went to Asia, we were earning money, and they contacted me a few years later and asked if they could buy me out of my pension. And they offered me 15 times what had been paid originally over 10 years into that pension, not only by myself, but also the matching funds from my employer. So it was not an unreasonable offer. Now, I took a lot of financial advice in consideration before accepting their offer, but I accepted their offer and it gave me another benefit. I now have control over my pension. Prior to that, the rules of the pension I was in meant that ultimately I could request to retire, but they would determine whether I could or not and at what age, and ultimately how much money I was going to get. I now have visibility and control over that pension. I can ultimately determine what rate I draw down at. Am I going to buy an annuity? Do I take a lump free tax sum when I retire in that sense? So that was piece of good luck number 1. Piece of good luck number 2 was, again, market circumstance, but for at least 10 years of our time in Asia, interest rates were historically low. And I've already talked about the benefit of leveraging money and debt to maximize capital gain returns. You invest 20%, you borrow 80%, you get capital gains on the 100%. Well, when you can borrow money at 1.5%, and let's face it, interest rates now are 4%, but when you can borrow money at 1.5%, you make a lot more money and you take a lot less risk. So my wife and I were incredibly lucky with interest rates because they went in the right way for us at a time when we were able to take advantage of them. So we had 2 pieces of really good luck. And I hope whatever you're doing in life, the same happens for you. Now, on the subject of luck, this brings me to my point number 8, which is diversify your assets right the way through what you're doing. Don't invest in just one thing. Don't just invest in property because property prices can crash. Don't just invest in stocks and shares because stocks and shares can crash. Don't just invest in one country because you may miss opportunity elsewhere, or that country may undergo a particularly tough time. So you want to diversify your portfolio globally and across a number of different assets, because good luck doesn't last forever and you need to manage your risk factors. You need to make sure, particularly once you're retired as I am, and it's going to be difficult if I ever wanted to go back to work, that you're going to be able to maintain your asset standard and your income in the future. And there's no guarantee of that. But obviously, diversifying your assets, having different assets globally spread, is some insurance against that. Number 9, you need a trapdoor. What do I mean by that? Look, don't put all your eggs into one basket. I've already talked about diversification. That's not what I mean. What I mean is you need one asset, which is your trapdoor. One asset which you are not reliant on for income, which you are not drawing down, which you are not taking income from, and is your emergency fund effectively. One asset which, should something go wrong, should there be a stock market crash, should a particular classification of asset decline, you can switch. You have something else that you can draw income from, and has the benefit of continuing to grow during your retirement because you're not drawing on it and taking income from it during that period. You must have a trapdoor. It's really important. Number 10, pragmatism, realism, and mental strength. You need all three. Firstly, pragmatism. You are going to have to do this for 25, 30 years unless you get incredibly lucky. And sometimes it's very tough to stick to a plan. My wife and I stuck to the plan. You have to be pragmatic about it. You also have to be realistic. You have to be realistic about what you're going to need, and you have to be realistic when things go wrong. Sometimes things will go wrong. Sometimes assets don't return what you expect. Sometimes investments decline. It happens. We're talking about a long period of time. And finally, mental strength. When you get to a point where you are in a position where actually you've achieved what you aim to, and you have that choice, to make that choice, to walk away from that great job, to change your lifestyle is very, very difficult to do. It takes a huge amount of courage. It's probably the toughest thing I and my wife ever decided to do in our lives. I don't regret it, but I can tell you it's tough to do it. So you have to be pragmatic, you have to be realistic, and you have to have mental strength, and you have to have a degree of luck. I hope this video has given you some idea as to how my wife and I ended up in Greece and how we managed to retire early. We're incredibly privileged to have done so. I'm fully acceptant of that. But we have also created this opportunity. No one's given it to us. We were incredibly lucky, I guess, and driven and ambitious. We had an initial idea and it became a plan, and that plan over the last 25 years has really directed a lot of what we've done. I'll be honest with you, it was a motivational factor for us, but I do believe that you can do the same. Anyone who has a dream, and it may be different to our dream, but anyone who has a dream, anyone who has a plan, anyone who has the ambition to deliver it can do so. And this is not a motivational video. This is just saying you can do it, but you've got to stick to it and you've got to have some luck in the process. So thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate your support for this channel. I will be doing more videos for you in the future. Please watch some of the other content I've got, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Thank you very much.